Some people describe the process of bringing a character to the screen like a relay race. First, you start out with character designers. The character designers are trying to give a sense of the possibilities. What are the infinite possibilities from a blank piece of paper of what that character might look like?
What I liked about this film was that I started off really early in this film, and they had Gene Gilmore's drawings, which were really dynamic and fun, and drawings from Mike McNola. He did some fantastic drawings. Yeah, Chen Yi Chang had done some really marvelous stuff with the hands too and designs, and he brought it back to a lot more sculpted designs in the way that he drew the hands, the faces, and things like that too.
The next part in the process, this kind of relay race of character design, is seeing if the drawing can move. It may look great on a piece of paper, but if a supervising animator can't take it and move it around to act and perform and dance and run and jump, then it's worthless. Now the animator has a chance to breathe life into the character, that life-giving process of animation where a character goes from a still drawing on a piece of paper to a living, breathing being.
Then once you've got that pretty well defined, you go into actually animating some scenes where you get the acting down. And that's, to me, that's the main thing. An animator is an actor.
You direct them just like you would direct any actor, except that the acting all comes out from their brain and from their heart all the way down their arms, right through the tips of their fingers.
You don't necessarily have to be a good draftsman. You do have to be a good entertainer. You do have to understand emotion and personality and how to equate that to movement and mass. It's a very, very strange combination of disciplines.
As an animator, not only myself, but everybody that's in animation, they study acting. Drawing is only half of the equation. Acting is the other half.
That's what's great about animation. You're not limited by your body type or your appearance. If you can draw it, you can be it. I don't really worry so much about making very clean drawings. As I said, I try to work as clean as possible so that my ideas get communicated. But cleanup, their job is then to take my rough drawings and clean them up, basically.
What we do in cleanup is we take the rough animation and we do the cleanup line drawings that you see on the screen. So the drawings you see on the screen are done by the cleanup department based on what these wonderful animators have acted out. Now, the challenge to that is there's not just one main character. We had a whole crew of characters.
The individual characters, they were cast with as much care and precision as Whitmore would cast each one of the roles in the Expeditionary Force.
The idea of Milo was easy. The little nerdy guy that just, couldn't do anything right but was very intelligent. Everybody knows somebody like that.
Milo in Atlantis has a very special place in my heart. I mean, not only after being in the business for almost 30 years, it's like this is probably the closest time I've ever come to animating a self-portrait.
There's a lot of me in it. I identify with a character because I'm sort of a historical bookworm, you might say. As a matter of fact, my wife has taken to calling me Milo in the household. So I'm the type of person where she'll ask me what time it is and I'll tell her how to make a watch.
The skills of the analytical mind, dissecting, how does things work? I mean, Milo could be a great animator if he wanted to. It makes me think that Milo is, in character, much the same type of hero that maybe Frank Capra had in a lot of his movies. Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, Meet John Doe. He is the little hero against the big world. In searching for what he looks like graphically, I remember surrounding myself with just tons of photographs of actors that I really admired in the cinema, spanning the last 8 decades. I'm getting little bits and pieces of ideas that start my imagination running in high gear. I put pencil to paper and just beginning working with shapes. After about 3 or 4 weeks of that, I've got maybe an array of about 50 different types of Milos in front of me. All of them a little bit different. All of them expressing a little bit different type of personality. So now's the time when I say, okay, can I have a meeting with the directors and Don and our art director, Dave Getz? And then they slowly start unpinning those and eliminating those that they don't think are quite Milo. And then through process of elimination, we boil it down to the one sketch that everybody likes. So once we had that one drawing, then I began to elaborate on that, doing more poses, more facial expressions, until we finally had what we thought was Milo. And now I turn out all the lights, I shut the door, I bolt it shut, put out the do not disturb sign, disconnect the phone, and I get into the scene. And I struggle to get that first attitude drawing. And all I'm thinking of is movement and mass on the paper. And after several reams of paper, I get it. And suddenly Milo is born. You have something there that is a life pulse, a persona that's alive, living on the paper.
I propose that we find Atlantis, find that power source, and bring it back to the surface.
Rourke was another character I think we, in terms of a villain, wanted to do something different with.
I love it when I win.
Which was the idea, instead of making him the usual mustache-twirling bad guy, to give him a little complexity. To not make him inherently evil, but make him greedy and, to sort of, try to create a three-dimensional character as opposed to a two-dimensional villain.
The first drawing I saw of Rourke was a Mike Mignola drawing of him. And then Chen Yi Chang, who helped design Mulan, did a drawing, kind of made Mike's drawings a little bit more animation friendly. And then we started seeing the film, a rough cut of it. And it wasn't until I saw the story sketches of Rourke in the reels, and I thought, wow, that's kind of what I like. I like that look. I kind of pulled both of those and tried to make something in between. Because I think they both had elements. It's just a matter of finding the right ones that would work for animation. When I started on Rourke, I think the feeling was that I thought, okay, I got wowed by the idea of villain. It took me back to that whole idea that I'm going to be able to do some crazy, bad stuff with this character. And then getting into the film, I, quickly realized that, he's not going to be that kind of villain.
Nothing personal!
And it wasn't until near the end where, he really busts out and goes crazy, was kind of when I really got the chance to be that little boy, going through, just going, I'm just going to mess around and you're going to, get him, kind of stuff where you can get crazy with it.
Kida, she's obviously going to run Atlantis. She's very strong-willed. She knows what she wants. She has influence over her father. Very strong-willed. She's tough. She's cute. She's the whole package.
Well, it was written in the script that the Atlanteans were kind of a mother race, that they kind of were the original race, and that all other races and cultures evolved from them. And so, just as far as Kida's design and the Atlanteans in general, what we tried to do is find a mixture of different cultures and different races, and then put some of those elements in there. She's got white hair, but really dark skin. And I made her nose just a little bit wider than the average Caucasian girl. I didn't want her to look like the girl next door. I worked very hard to find traits that I thought were attractive. And one of the things I thought was attractive was these full lips. I think it's exotic, and it's also, even in our modern times, considered very attractive. When I looked at models in magazines and stuff, I noticed that a lot of them, no matter what their other features, had very full lips. We come up with ideas that are about her personality and how to play a scene, which with her has a lot to do with subtext, because a lot of her dialogue could sound very firm and maybe a little too stoic, and she could come off really one note if she wasn't played right. But what we've been able to do is find what's inside of and what's behind her words and the emotions that she expresses externally, to find the subtext in her relationship with her father. For example, she disagrees with her father's politics, and yet she cares for him. And so even as she's arguing with him, she's helping him to be comfortable and wiping his face with a damp cloth and dimming the lights and trying to care for him. There's a side of her that's very serious and passionate about her goals in life. But there's also another side of her, and that's a real playful side, and we see that part of her come out when she's with Milo.
I have some questions for you, and you are not leaving this city until they are answered.
Sweet, Dr. Sweet was a great character to draw because we wanted to make sure that we kept his personality at all times, because he was cool. I wanted him to be as cool as he could be through the whole thing.
Name Sweet, Joshua Sweet, medical officer.
Doc Sweet, one of the first African-American characters we've had in a Disney feature film, is animated by one of our first African-American supervising animators, Ron Husband. Now, Sweet moves totally different than anybody else. He has quick little accents. It was a wonderful contradiction being he's the largest member of the team. He's huge, muscular, hulking, and this man is as fleet as can be. He moves so fast. And I think that's a nice little contradiction that Ron put into the animation.
But I was looking for something that had some appeal, big guy, not a mean guy. So when you look at him, you don't want to be repulsed. He's a big teddy bear, you might say, because there was a lot of backstory in my mind as to who this character was. Well, he was educated because he was, it's one part in the film where he had been in university, but his actual medical training, instead of being on the cadavers or in the classroom, was out on the battlefield.
One day I'm studying gross anatomy in the classroom, the next I'm sewing up Rough Riders on San Juan Hill.
He being a doctor, and this being a period piece, we wanted to make sure that the medical equipment and things that he was using would be contemporary with the time period. So I was in contact with a couple of archives. Howard University had an archive, as well as Virginia Commonwealth University. So I was in contact with them, and they sent me some pictures and Xeroxes of medical equipment that was in vogue during that period of time. His background is his dad being a Buffalo soldier, marrying a Native American, and he'd been being produced from that union. So everything just sort of melted into fit as to who he was as a character, and then taking all that and designing that into the final character design.
The character Vinnie was somebody, I thought, an explosives engineer who for a while, it was somebody who carried around a gramophone. So every time he was going to blow something up, he'd put a little opera on and he'd kaboom, he'd do it to opera. I mean, fun, weird, strange stuff like that. A lot of times you have ideas that just don't translate well to the actual physical production of a movie. So I'm thinking they got in and they thought, how can you have this guy carrying a gramophone around everywhere? It'll look a little strange.
So I had to go rethink. Okay, how is this character going to move? How is he going to act? And I ended up thinking of him as a skinny guy in a turtle outfit. That's how I think of him. I mean, I think of him as actually a really thin guy underneath this big shell, like this real slow-moving turtle who does all his stuff. So that's how I approach it. And if you look at his neck, he's got this big cowl. And he's got this real skinny neck going down underneath it.
What else have you got in there?
Gun powder, nitroglycerin, notepads, fuses, wicks, glue, and paper clips, big ones.
Like I went and watched the Godfather movies, of all things, for looking for specific things of Italian actors. The way, the old stereotype, Italians use their hands. You look at any of the broad Italian actors, if you're pointing with your hand, your whole hand. They don't point with their fingers. And so it's like, so when Vinnie comes up and he has to say, hey, and he's pointing with his entire hand, this way, that way,
Vinnie was smooth as silk. Vinnie didn't move a lot. If you ever noticed, Vinnie, he did a lot of things perfectly still. His personality wasn't supposed to move a lot. And he had a lot of little gadgets on. And his bombs always had wires and everything with it.
And it's kind of like the Magnificent Seven, right? He's good with the knife, Well, he's good with the dynamite.
I only got about 10, plus, 5 of my own.
Anytime they need dynamite, TNT, nitroglycerin, he's got it. And he has a lot of it.
Hey, look, I made a bridge.
Helga was my tip of the hat to all those old 40s movies. The Platinum Blonde and all the Humphrey Bogart movies, this smoking, mysterious babe.
As a character, Helga was kind of the femme fatale of this group of explorers. She had to be Whitmore's personal assistant, so kind of this graceful person who took care of his business life and kind of a personal assistant, but also had to be a tough-as-nails commander when it came to going on this expedition. We also had an opportunity in Helga to create a character that was really from the comic genre. And that Paris studio gives us a tremendous chance to use a European group of artists like Yoshi Tamura, who is actually a Japanese animator who works in our Paris studio.
She looks like a James Bond girl first, so she has to be very sexy and very active and very strong girl. And also, she's a villain, so I tried to push her as a pretty woman, but very cold also.
Tell them to drop their weapons. Now!
Helga, I loved just because she was a tough woman. She was fun. She was difficult. The braid had a life of its own, and we had to make sure that the braid worked consistently all the time.
You said we were in this together! You promised me a percentage!
She was animated in Paris and cleaned up in Paris. So we had to make sure that she fit within the group of characters, because the rest of the characters were done here in Burbank, and we had to make sure that everybody fit.
Nothing personal.
Audrey was, again, just, I think, a desire to have a female character that was closer to Milo's age. And, you know, the guys were, you know, concerned about, well, we should have a mechanic person because these machines, they could bust down and all that sort of stuff. And I just thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to, you know, to create a teenage girl grease monkey whose father, you know, was like this hardcore mechanic, and she was kind of tough and from Queens or the Bronx.
I think it's in her blood. She just grew up with it, so it's second nature. And we're talking about 1914, so I think she's a little bit oblivious to some of the standards around her of the time, which would include being a female doing this kind of work, because there weren't a lot of mechanics running around in 1914 anyway, never mind female mechanics, never mind young female mechanics.
We're taking on water fast. I don't want to be around when it hits the boilers.
How much time do we have?
20 minutes if the bulkhead holds. You better make that 5.
I listen to the track a lot. You know, by the time the scene is in my hand, in my office, I've already gotten direction and have some sense of where this piece fits into the continuity in terms of the acting and what's happening emotionally with the character. I sit down and just execute attitude poses mostly that I think will say the little icons of the scene, and then it's a matter of flushing things out.
Audrey Ramirez reminds me so much of Anne-Marie Barnwell. Very feisty, very spunky, very full of verve, you know, and a very strong character.
2 for flinching. See ya, Milo.
Packard is the communications expert on this expedition, but to look at her, you wouldn't know that because she looks like somebody's grandmother. She's sort of sullen, very low-key, a little acerbic, very deadpan.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Mrs. Packard was a Don Hahn invention. That he came to a meeting and he said, I got this great idea for a character. How about this, like this old chain-smoking broad who runs the communications in the sub, but she runs it like, you know, the Mayberry RFD, you know, operator, or like the Lily Tomlin character. So we all just thought that was pretty funny.
She had a lot of gadgets. And the funniness of her personality was how still she was all the time. And her cigarette smoking, which I'm glad they let us keep in because it was part of her personality with that rough voice.
She just seems like the type that would have been pretty flamboyant in her day, but she's somewhat of a faded Gibson girl, you'd say.
Forget your jammies, Mrs. Packard?
I sleep in the nude.
A lot of her acting comes not from action, but more from finding that right attitude and then just maybe giving it a squint or a head tilt or something like that. And you can get so much out of one drawing. So basically, I spend my time on Packard finding that one drawing and then milking it.
Moliere had a lot of line mileage. Line mileage is how long it takes you to draw a character. Sometimes it takes an hour to clean up one drawing. And in the movie, there's 125,000 cleanup drawings. Moliere took a little longer because he had every gadget in the world on his head.
You have to stop the dirt! Dirt from around the globe spanning the centuries! What have you done?
Kirk and Gary, they usually give the animators a lot of leeway. You know, we worked on those early designs, realizing that he's, you know, the comedy character in the movie. They sort of said he's sort of like Pigpen, just dirty, little dirty guy, French Pigpen. And, you know, I was just thinking about how to keep his shape distinct from the other characters. I just wound up going real simple with, you know, just basically a real round head and this bullet-shaped body, and just keeping him real animatable and fun, so we could do a lot of slapstick, a lot of really broad, extreme expressions on him and attitudes. If you look at the design, most of the detail is really around the face with the goggles and the lamp and the little string on the lamp and the little crank. Most of the detail on the character is really just on his head. And Kirk and Gary said, well, he's sort of rodent-like, he's the mole, so he has to be rodent-like. So I made sure I gave him buck teeth, and kind of a mouth that's sort of like a mouse's mouth. It has sort of this triangular shape to it. But I wanted to make him look French because he's a French guy. And, I was playing around with a profile with a real receding chin, and, basically the face is constructed where the chin is way back here, and then the thing that sticks out the furthest is this big nose. And I saw a picture of Charles de Gaulle, this great shot of this profile of Charles de Gaulle, and I'm like, there's Moliere's profile. He has a little mustache, the whole bit. So I put that up there, on my board as I was drawing and coming up with the designs. Well, who else could be more French than Charles de Gaulle, right?
I remember coming in specifically with the idea of a cook who had, because it's such an interesting time period, you have people who, could have participated in the settling of the West in 1912 and 13. So the idea of a cook being somebody who had cooked for General Custer on that fateful day and felt guilty because he thought it was all about, the meal he'd served him. If I'd only cooked him.
I seen this back in the Dakota. They can smell fear just by looking at you, so keep quiet.
He literally is like a caricature of like all those Western sidekicks. Walter Brennan, Gabby Hayes.
When the role of Cookie first came up, it seemed like a good fit for Sean Keller because if you were to know him, Sean Keller is Cookie.
For the appetizer, Caesar salad, escargot, and your Oriental spring roll.
Don, Kirk, and Gary are just really neat guys, and they just wanted me to work on their film. They gave me the Cookie character because he's like this old Western cook and like the old Western sidekick, and those are the types of films that I generally watch a bunch of times over and over and over again. And I guess they saw me acting in the hallways, just with my arms up and flailing about. And, hey, maybe he'd be pretty good to do this silly character of ours here.
I got you 4 basic food groups: beans, bacon, whiskey, and lard.
So when the character of Whitmore knocked around, we thought, well, who's a quirky, funny guy that can do this character too? We all looked at each other and said, well, Sean, if we could clone him and get another Sean, he could do both characters.
They basically knew kind of what they wanted up front. Old, very old, ancient, eccentric, old guy with too much money in his hands that he knows what to do with.
We knew we needed a character, Mr. Whitmore, as it turned out, to send this expedition on its way. But he couldn't be an explorer. He was just a partner, a friend, an old college friend of Milo's grandfather, Thaddeus Thatch.
Did you really know my grandfather?
Oh, yeah. Met old Thaddeus back in Georgetown. Class of '66. We stayed close friends till the end of his days.
He was in the style of those great kind of Getty, Leland Stanford kind of robber barons who maybe was into logging and mining and construction and railroads and had all the money he needed. And now it was at the point in his career when he could just be a philanthropist and bankroll things that caught his fancy. And of course, one of the things that caught his fancy was this lifelong promise he made to Milo's grandfather.
I said, Thatch, if you ever actually find that so-called journal, not only will I finance the expedition, but I'll kiss you full on the mouth. Imagine my embarrassment when he found the darn thing.
The hardest character was the king.
The challenges I had, I think, the most on the king was his subtlety and age and so many different points of perspective. Like, he wants to say something, and to get there and say it, it would be just all these little minute details to go, no. And that's it. He would speak Atlantean. It's just funny to be able to animate a different language and go, you know how to say that. You know what those mouth shapes kind of look like. To put together a sentence that you don't know what the words are, and you have to know what he's also saying. The king was tough to do because he's got more tattoos on his face, more hair on his cheeks and beard and mustache and all that kind of stuff. And he's got tattoos that go across his head as well as on his ears, so it was tough for a cleanup to do, and Marshall was the one that was doing it.
Never again do I want to do a character with tattoos. We had so much trouble. He's a wonderful character, and he's dying through most of the movie, but he had a tattoo, he was blind, he had a robe with every design in the world on it. To stay consistent with that character was difficult.
I heard somebody come in my office and say, "You rotoscoped that." I said, "No, I didn't. I didn't rotoscope a foot, let alone a hand, you know, or a mouth." Yeah.
That is all.
You really count up the number of people that it takes to make that ensemble work on the screen, and it's pretty extraordinary. Not only the number of people, but the kind of collaboration they have to make those characters live and breathe and exist, and ultimately to make you want to just believe that you're looking at flesh and blood, living, breathing characters. That's the goal of great animation, is to bring characters to life.
Say yach! Yach!